A special thanks go to our fourth participant. He's not with us at the moment, Secretary Kerry. I think he was really instrumental to get this outcome from Dubai. So we had, as IEA, we worked very closely with COP28 presidents, and we organized 5 high-level dialogues, which was chaired by Dr. Sultan and myself, bringing several governments and the other thought leaders together at different occasions in the context of G20, in Nairobi, Africa summit, in the UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, and the other meetings, and try to have a convergence of thoughts and preoccupations of the governments. And I said, for us, even though we are good friends, friendship is different than the business. For us, there are 5 conditions to consider COP28 to be successful. Number 1, we said we should come and get an outcome that the countries pledge to triple their renewable capacity. Number 2, doubling the rate of energy efficiency. Number 3, agreeing to having a major cut of methane emissions. Number 4, countries should give a signal of an orderly move away from fossil fuels. And number 5, providing financial support for clean energy transition in emerging and developing countries. 5 of them. And I see that many of them have been now reflected in the outcome text, and for which we are really delighted. Now, there are, of course, other areas, one area especially, which is not there, and in my view, it is the fault line of our fight against climate change, which is the financing issue. Mm-hmm. How do we finance clean energy transition in emerging and developing countries? This is the fault line. So what we are going to do is, as International Energy Agency, these pledges are made, commitments are made, but commitments and pledges are something, doing them is something else. So we at the IEA, as the custodian of those numbers, we will track the progress of countries, what they said in COP28 and what they are doing in terms of renewables, efficiency, methane emissions, and others, and regularly publish it and in a transparent way with the international community. Maybe one last point here. The next one you asked, it is in Azerbaijan, COP29, and we are fortunate to have Mr. Minister with us, very able, experienced minister. As it happens, the topic I said, which was missing in COP28, the financing, will be a key topic in Azerbaijan, in Baku. And Mr. Minister, as International Energy Agency, we are very happy to support you to have a good outcome and to complement the steps made in Dubai. Thank you.
Thank you. And Catherine, could you assess for us?
Yeah, sure. Representing the private sector.
Yes, indeed.
And for us in the private sector, what is important is that indeed we see this energy conundrum as a positive challenge and source of action and even, I would say, construction, which is what a little bit the COP28 allowed us to do with this renewed momentum around the tripling of the renewables and then doubling the energy efficiency, which I thought was very exciting because it's all about building the low-carbon energy system of tomorrow, which needs to be low-carbon but also affordable and resilient. And these two pillars are going to be very important components of this new energy system. They will not be sufficient, though, of course. Mm-hmm. So a lot more needs to happen, and particularly around what we like to call flexibility. These are means to store energy at large scale, very important complement, because, of course, you cannot just rely on sun or wind. You really have to be able to store this energy when there is too much of it. so that you can have a really baseload type green energy system, complemented, of course, with molecules, which also themselves need to be greenified. So a lot more needs to happen, but from I think a symbolic and very important renewed commitment to action, to investment, to faith also into renewables, I thought that was indeed absolutely important. And that coincided with two movements. One, we felt that there was a bit of a faltering commitment toward the energy transition leading to the COP, so that was really important to have those conclusions. And second, some really impressive numbers that just came out from 2023 energy mix. For example, in Germany, which has been very criticized for coal, etc. Well, renewables energy consumption was up to 52% in 2023 in Germany. In Portugal, it was 61%. In the UK, there was 42 renewable electricity injected into the grid. That was in 2023. Mm-hmm. So it is possible. The energy transition is underway. It's well active. And I think, having the COP28 at the same time that we have these incredible numbers, I think that's very, very interesting. And then maybe final comment on the COP28 is that then there was this transition away from fossil fuel. And in my mind, maybe looking forward, and I don't know if it's going to be next year, Mr. Minister, or the COP, the future COPs, as we see these percentages going up, as we have more confidence that this energy system of tomorrow will be that of today, then hopefully we can have a pace and a time horizon for this phasing out. This is really something that I think we should be all working together towards.
Let me stick with you for just a moment and ask a follow-up to that. As the representative on this panel of the private sector, looking forward to COP29 and into the future, do you think that these conferences are helpful enough in terms of pushing for the very real things that need to be done in the private sector, the very real investments, the very real focus on renewable energy and the new energy future? And what could be done to propel that more? How could they be more helpful?
Obviously, I think those dialogues are indispensable. What we do in the private sector is so sensitive to regulation, but not just regulation. We talk a lot about regulation, but there are also market-based schemes. CO2 price is something, obviously, that we absolutely need to together improve and have a better coordination between the different countries, getting rid of some inefficient fossil fuel subsidies which drag down the CO2 prices are some of the things that are very important. But then I would move towards the softer domain as well, which is it's very important that governments believe that it is possible to build this affordable energy system of tomorrow. Mm-hmm. If not, they will be afraid. If not, public opinion would tell them, no, we don't want that. And then we can go backwards. And I think it would be a very, very terrible backwards movement. And maybe the last point for me is collectively, if we could do a better job at costing the non-action, how much this global warming, how much this climate change will cost to societies and to people, and how do we quantify that effectively so that it's not just about comparing with what was before, it was better before, but really being scared about the future if we do nothing.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Director General, it's fairly clear that adoption of renewable energy is not in and of itself going to be able to help the world reach these goals. Can you talk a little bit, as we look forward to COP29, about how we make up these gaps, how we make progress to the goals, which are obviously still very far away? Can you talk just very specifically and concretely about what you see as the most positive areas in that?
So maybe I give one positive and one not positive
that
example.
Would be great.
Okay with you. So positive one is I said we are going to look at what was said and what is happening. So we are the organization of numbers. We are not political, just the numbers. And last week we look at in the renewables part what is happening. To be honest with you, a big growth in renewables. Catherine mentioned some European countries, but beyond Europe, it is in China, it is in India, it is in Brazil, big growth. Last year, 2023, global renewable power capacity increased by 50%, 50. Normally, the bad things increase so much and the good things don't increase so much. Inflation increased 50%, the criminality increased by, but this is the renewables increased by 50%, which means about 510 gigawatts in 1 year. It's a huge number. And mainly by solar, about 2/3 solar, but also wind and others. And to be very fair, China is the main driver here. The amount of renewables China installed 2023 is equal to the amount of renewables the entire world installed in 2022. So China alone, so China is a big driver there. So this is renewables, and we look, with these policies, with these projects, how will it continue? We see that with these projects, with these policies, renewables between now and 2030 will increase the factor of 2.5. So the Dubai is 3 factor, is 2.5. So we are not there, but we are not miles away from that. So renewables are doing a good job there compared to others. This is the good news. The other not good news is, again, my key topic, financing and investment. So overall, clean energy investment is growing. 5 years ago, global clean energy investment was $1 trillion 5 years ago, and last year it came to 1.8 trillion. So $800 million of increase. So what is the bad news here? Bad news is the following. All this increase came from the advanced economies and China. There was no great increase or increase at all from the emerging and developing countries. This would be, in my view, the point that we need to pay attention. This is for me the bad news. This is for me the fault line of fighting against climate change globally, how we are going to finance the clean energy. And as such, maybe I go back to COP28 once again in front of everybody. Thanks Secretary Kerry for his great achievement to get a good result from Dubai, Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Secretary Kerry. We're very grateful to have you here with us. We had asked everyone, if you wouldn't mind jumping in right at the beginning, to just assess for us the one critical success and one critical failure from COP28 as we then turn our attention to COP29.
Well, thank you, and my profound apologies to everybody for being late. I had a meeting with Premier Li Qiang, which was unexpected, but it was important enough that it sort of upset the schedule, and I apologize to everybody. Also, we're upstairs in a meeting with major corporate leadership, which is critical to the decision-making that will decide whether COP28 is as meaningful as some of us think it truly is. So let me answer the question, and I'm not reaching for a conclusion that I don't think is there when I say that it's not just one thing that was really quite significant here. This COP, I've been to COPs since we set it up in 1992 in Rio. And so for years, with Kyoto to Copenhagen, Poland, various places, I've seen how this can work and how it cannot work. And Paris was a direct result of it not working in Copenhagen. And the conclusion we all came to is that every nation had to make up its own plan. Not exactly the most effective thing, but it's the best that could be done. What happened with both Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh building towards it was that in Dubai, we were able to change that paradigm to some degree with one critical paragraph. And that paragraph is that we must transition away from fossil fuels. Remember, we could not get a resolution between phase out, phase down in Glasgow. And there was no mention of this in Paris. But in Dubai, 195 countries, including oil, gas-producing countries, came to consensus that we must say to the world that we must transition away from fossil fuels. But they didn't leave it there. That's not where it stopped. This is the largest success, is that it said, in keeping with the science, which means once again reinforcing the 1.5 degrees, which the science has now settled on as critical. And it also said, in furtherance of the objective, which we all accepted, of having a net zero by 2050, which is a hard stop plan. And finally, the critical words, accelerating in this decade. Now, when you add all of that together, folks, and 195 countries have signed off on it, that is a profound, important paradigm shift, because everybody is now working by a stronger guidepost, a guideline, a guardrail, if you will, which is that we must achieve by 2030 the 43% minimum reduction globally, and that we need to do other things. Now, you add to that that in Dubai, we had 1 day committed to methane. China and the United States stood up on the same podium and came together saying, here's the China plan, here's our plan, we're going to work together. We actually created a working group, which we just met on the other day with Xie Zhenhua, my counterpart, who's retiring. But we decided that this working group is going to work together to help implement on the methane. That's a big deal. In addition to which, on day one, because we worked all summer in the diplomacy leading up to it, we were able to agree that we took one of the most contentious issues of all off the table, which was effectively a COP killer called loss and damage, but which we found common ground to be able to set up a real fund with people understanding it's real, with initial funding in it, not sufficient to be able to be the payout, but money that is there in order to set up the fund, fundamentally, to make it real, to get the workings going, to put the rules in place, and to work with the World Bank where it will be housed to make it happen. To have that passed on the first day without contention helped establish what we were able to do with the rest of it. And then you look at the combination of health, first day ever, health is linked to climate, which it is. And the first time we've really had food and food production and food consumption on the table as a separate issue. This was a game-changing COP and outcome. But I will add the caveat. What's the downside? The downside is that it's words on paper. And we've been through Paris, and we've been through subsequent Sharm el-Sheikh and so forth, Glasgow. And we know that if people aren't going to act on those words, we're in serious trouble. And we are right now, knowing that the latest scientific assessment is we're at 1.545, we're at 1.48 degrees now. Now, that doesn't mean that's a permanent status, but there's very little to show that there's enough transition already taking place that it won't blow us past 1.5 degrees and we're going to have to claw back. That's the downside. And we've got to recognize that reality, and we've got to start to address that reality here at this meeting in the WEF, but in everything that happens now this year. It means no business as usual. It can't just be sitting there saying, okay, we're going to open up the following oil field and we're going to pump away like that. We have to effect the transition. And the final comment I'll make quickly is we today have the available technology to actually live up to our requirement by 2030. We're just not deploying it fast enough. I'll tell you who is deploying it fast enough is a place called China, which is deploying more renewables and manufacturing more renewables than all the rest of the world put together. And I guarantee you that the amount of renewable they are now already deploying, even though they may not have changed it publicly, is going to have an impact on the date that they peak. And I think Fatih will agree with me, and it will have an impact on their reduction of emissions, which is critical to all of us to winning this battle. So we are in a different world, folks, post COP28. And the issue is going to be, do we live up to our responsibilities to do what's necessary to make that different world real for the long term? That's the challenge.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I wanted to ask you, Minister Jabarov, if you would chat for just for a moment on two things that Secretary Kerry said there. One is the funding mechanism for countries that have fewer economic resources and that may not have the ability to invest in renewable. I know that you have been very intensely focused on that. And then what you would expect at COP29 on this very obviously critical but contentious issue of transition away from fossil fuels. I think those are the two things from that are so forward-looking in terms of what happens next.
Thank you very much. Well, I think just as already mentioned, financing mechanisms are the center theme of COP29. And I think Secretary Kerry very precisely described the challenge ahead of us, and that is how to ensure that the mechanisms are in place. And I think same goes to one of your questions earlier, that do ensure the necessity by private sector, by governments including, to ensure that. We do believe that, well, first of all, that's exactly something what we'll be discussing, but some of the early bird ideas include the following. We do believe that as it is a global issue, there is a right and proper mechanism, international financial institutions, multilateral development banks. So these are important partners in the game, and alignment in terms of goals and means of how to get there seems as an obvious choice and solution. We similarly need to think of ensuring the ways how we can encourage private investment in the sector, and again goes back to mechanisms. A lot depends on the governments, and I think development of the mechanism will be important. Talking about example of Azerbaijan, yes, we have been making a conscious choice of using revenues of the country, including from the fossil fuels, to start energy transition. And I think in our particular case, we are well ahead of our target of having 30% of our energy needs satisfied by 2030. Now we think we can achieve there around 28 if we continue on the same path. And maybe last point that I will make, I guess one of the lessons which we learned from previous COPs, most notably from COP28, is that exclusion doesn't work. 2 years ago here in in May, in Davos, and last year we still were debating is the discussion has to include someone or to exclude usual suspects. And I think the success of the initiative of Global Decarbonization Accelerator as an example, when the pledge was made specifically by the energy companies, by fossil fuel producers, shows that, of course, we have to have everyone in the room, not just on the side of those who do emissions, but also consumers. And I refer back to the early morning session on energy efficiency and on energy reduction, which I personally found for myself extremely interesting.
Thank you. Director General Birol, I wanted to ask you, you just praised Secretary Kerry, who has announced that he is going to step down from this role. I think everyone in the room is also very keenly aware, and I'm going to ask Secretary Kerry the same question, but very keenly aware of the U.S. election, which will happen very shortly before COP29 happens. What do you think the outcome of that election could have in terms of the U.S. administration's role in the effectiveness of the implementation, the words on paper that actually need to be implemented to make these things happen? I think that, it is very clear that the election is a toss-up. We have a sitting president who could be reelected. We also have a former president who could be reelected. Could you talk about that a little bit and how you view that going forward?
It's a tough question.
Good question for the IEA.
Thank you very much, sir. I should say perhaps the Kerry part. So you said Secretary Kerry is going to depart. So this is what will change. First of all, it will be much more difficult to reach our climate targets, to bring everybody together. It will be much harder for all of us. And for me, it will be less fun to work on that. Mr. Secretary, I learned so much from Mr. Secretary. I enjoyed so much, and I really admire him deeply, and it will be much more difficult, both in terms of having results and on the way to have these results. This journey was really unique for me. For the change in the government of the United States, of course, I cannot say too much on that, but what I can tell you is that we have seen many changes in the administrations in the United States, in other countries, but nobody could stop the clean energy transitions. It is going so strong. And it is really based on economics now. I mentioned to you a few minutes ago that the last year, 2023, renewable capacity additions was historically, and we have never seen such a big growth in renewables. The main reason was not this government or that government, it was the economics. Today, the new power plants, when you look at new power plants, in 95% of the world, renewables are the cheapest option to build a new power plant. It can be that government, it can be the other government. And when I look at the United States, taking no position about the different parties, a big chunk of the clean energy installations are taking place in the regions that have a different view on the climate change. So electric cars moving very strongly, very, very strongly in Europe, in China, in the United States, and elsewhere. And I had a meeting recently with the top 20 car manufacturer CEOs. 18 out of 20 said electric cars are the #1 priority for their business strategies. And this is not because those CEOs are completely pushing the climate agenda. This was a business for them. They say the business is electric cars, the next chapter. So there is a very strong move on clean energy, technology, innovation, and I think there may be different administrations here and there, but it will not stop the clean energy move. And I believe, unfortunately, increasing extreme weather events, the floods, droughts, fires, would make millions of people understand that this is a must and we have to deal with it. So therefore, I believe the clean energy is moving fast and is going to move fast regardless of who is going to sit in the White House or in Élysée or in different parts of the world. I really believe it. But I really hope that whoever takes the job in the United States or in France or in Indonesia or India would be a friend of clean energy.
Thank you. Secretary Kerry, I want to take questions from the audience, but before we do that, could you briefly talk on this issue? How do you think that the world, as we head into COP29 in this year of so many elections around the globe, how do you think that the world should think about American leadership on the climate issue going forward, given the fact that the U.S. election is quite uncertain?
Well, first of all, it's January, and the election is bound to look uncertain no matter what the numbers were. And there's a lot of history to be made in one way or the other over the course of these next months, which, I'm quite confident is going to have an impact on the outcome, and I'll speak to that in a minute. I just want to clarify a thing. First, Fatih, thank you for your incredibly generous words. And I have obviously enjoyed enormously our relationship. And I have news for you. I'm not retiring. I'm not retiring, folks. I'm simply facing the reality. Because it's an election year, there's not much that's going to happen in the Congress this year. I am hatched. In other words, by under law, the hatch law in our country, because I'm a federal employee, I'm not allowed to engage in the campaign. That's not going to happen. So I want to be able to speak out on that and other issues globally, but I'm going to stay at this. And there are so many different ways to continue to be able to be engaged in this. So unfortunately, you're stuck. You'll see me at the COP. You'll see me. Can't get rid of me yet. And I'd be around, and it's my honor and privilege to work with you and others on this going forward. We'd really have a moment to make a change. And I'm very excited about the prospect. I think the private sector is going to be critical to our ability to meet this challenge, and I intend to be engaged in that. So enough on that. On the elections and where we're going with climate. Let me look, folks. People will want to scare people and say, "Oh my God," and to some degree, there's a proposition that suggests that one candidate or another may scare some people. But let me be clear. CEOs of the largest corporations in the world are really smart people. And they may make a bad judgment here or there, but it's not, they know what they're doing. There's no way that the companies I talked about earlier, and particularly Ford. Do you think Ford and General Motors and Mercedes and Volkswagen and Hyundai and Toyota and all these, and Mercedes and whatever, do you think those CEOs are going to say, "Oh my God, they just elected a new president. Let's go back and build internal combustion engine cars"? Not on your life. Not happening. This economic revolution is underway, and it's much bigger than any politician, any one person. Even when Donald Trump was president of the United States, guess what? 75, he pulled out of Paris, but the American people and the governors stayed in Paris. We have 37 governors, Republican and Democrat alike, who implemented their renewable portfolio laws, and they continued to deploy clean electricity and clean energy and so forth. That's not going to change. Even when Trump was president, 75% of the new electricity in the United States of America was from renewables. And now it's about 90 to 95% or something. So we're on this road. 85% of the IRA money, the Inflation Reduction Act money, guess what? It's going to red states, as they're called. You think those congressmen are going to turn around and say, "Hey, take those jobs away from here now"? I don't think so. So I just don't see that happening. And I think the American public, this is going to be one of the reasons I want my voice back to be able to go out and get involved, is this issue is a voting issue. And people ought to go to the polls because they want to continue down this road and see this new economy emerge and not have air that kills them and gives them diseases and sends their kids to the hospital in the summer from environmentally induced asthma and so forth. The arguments for why we need to continue this are profound and critical and really will make a difference, I believe, as it gets out there. So I'm optimistic about where we're going to wind up, and there are some very serious criminal charges still pending with respect to what amounts to insurrectionist activity in your country, in our country, lack of upholding the Constitution and so forth. I'm not going to talk about the politics of it, but everybody knows this is a very volatile and profoundly long period of time that's going to play out. and just don't get caught up making judgments today. Keep your eyes focused on the prize. Do what we need to do to implement what we did in Dubai. Do what we need to do to get those renewables out there that are able today to help us meet the standard by 2030. Let's not lose the options we have still available to us. That's the key here. And forget about the politics for the time being. And you'll see a playing field to start to take shape by summertime and so forth. But I have confidence in the American people who made the right choice in 2020, and we'll see where we come out here.
Thank you. We're going to squeeze in one quick audience question, and then we're probably going to have to wrap up. Go ahead, sir. We're going to bring you a microphone really quick. Want to make sure we get a little audience participation here.
The Swiss Parliament, I thank you for your work at the COP, and I also agree with your story. Solar has won the race, the electric car has won the race, but Mr. Kerry, you also said that we're so close at this 1.5, and we might to crawl back, and to meet 1.5, science also says we need these negative emissions, and for the negative emissions, the economic is different, there you need a price on carbon somehow to get this rolling and scaling this up. Perhaps you can outline how you see that we will scale up these negative emissions in time to meet our climate targets.
You want to go first?
Well, Fatih is the expert on what's going to happen in terms of the emissions and the temperatures. But the fact is that I think, the heart of your question is really, will we be able to claw back? Is that what you're asking more than anything? Or is it... Well, we are behind, but but I think what came out of Dubai is the roadmap for being able to ramp up. The ramp up is tripling your deployment of energy, of renewable. Your ramp up is doubling your efficiency, which is what everybody agreed to. Your ramp up is putting more money into and being more serious about adaptation on a global basis. Your ramp up is developing those technologies, which we're doing with the IRA, and beginning to put them out there through blended finance and other mechanisms where we de-risk the deals and attract the capital that is necessary to make this happen. In the end, the power of the marketplace is going to be much bigger than a politician saying do this or do that. And there's going to be a very, I think, significant amounts of money to be made in that marketplace as people invest. Look, take, for example, even adaptation. Adaptation does not have to be just expenditure. It can be investment. And you can invest in revenue-producing adaptation events. And a return on investment of 10, 12, 15%, it may not be Google or Apple, but there are a lot of folks who will happily walk away with a 12 or 15%. Pension funds, particularly, if that infrastructure has a 25-year, 30-year PPA, that's pretty sound investment. That's bankable. So all of these things can happen at a much faster pace if we stay focused on that prize and make them happen. And in my judgment, the innovation scale is really beginning to already tip in ways that are very exciting. We have 88 new battery companies in the United States since the IRA passed. And I don't know, I haven't looked at their technologies. I haven't examined where they are today. I did see a few of them a couple of years ago. But someone's going to break through here. And you get some major, you get not 4 hours, but 4 days or more on batteries, and you start to get, AI playing a role, which it will play a role in managing grids and in doing some of the things we need to do to make us much more efficient. And all of a sudden the prices start to come down like they have. 83% down for solar, 50% or so down for wind, 97% down for lithium. I mean, this is going to continue to happen. And in the end, the price point is going to win. That's what people are going to look at. And right now, solar and wind kill fossil fuel, particularly when you look at the true cost of that fuel. You tell me the cost of the ocean warming from coal dust. What's the cost of the acidification of the ocean? What's the cost of the 7 million people a year who die because of the bad quality of air that is coming from coal burning? I mean, you run the list of real costs. This is a no-brainer. And we have to do a better job of putting those real costs out there. Fatih?
Maybe just one word.
Yes,
In addition, everything what Secretary Kerry said, we will need negative emissions, direct air capture. I hope we don't, but it looks like we will need those technologies. And the way to incentivize it, they need to be remunerated. So therefore, the carbon price will be the best solution to give an incentive to those technologies to complement what Secretary Kerry already detailed out.
Excellent. Thank you. We are out of time. Thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank this distinguished panel for this wide array of perspectives. Mr. Minister, Mr. General, Catherine, and Secretary Kerry, thank you all so much, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you.